Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, discussing all things audiobooks with the authors that write the stories and the narrators that perform them. Brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. My guests today are the creators of Bytes, narrators Emily Wu Zeller and Gabra Zackman. Welcome, ladies, to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
No, yeah, as soon as you guys announced this, I was like, on my wish list, I'm having them on. And Gabra has been a past guest of mine before, so she's been through this craziness with me already. But Emily is brand new, and I'm so excited, too, to have them both here today to chat.
I'm a podcast virgin.
Am I your first? No, wait.
I'm your podcast virgin.
You're my, okay, yeah. There's always something new. I was gonna say I don't mind popping cherries, but but yeah, but this is the first time with me. You know, it's always great. And then, like I said before, once in, you're always a member of the family, so we keep you guys around because you guys also rock, and why not? But why don't we start by having you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves and kind of how you got started in narration, and then we'll go from there.
Gabra, why don't you go first?
Yeah, happy to. First of all, Viviana, I just want to say again, thank you so much for having us. I find you so engaging and easy to talk to, and you're also such a huge supporter of the community. So I speak for more than just Emily and I when I say that we're really, we could not exist without people like you, of which there are very few, who are so supportive and so warm and actually just so into the content. So thank you. So truly, thank you. So let's see. I will say I'll give the 3-minute or 30-second 3-step version, which is that I started in this business as an actor, not as a voice actor, but as a stage actor. Shakespeare actually being one of my great loves, and wound up doing a lot of regional theater, as well as some film and TV, as well as local theater, and did a nice mix of classical and new plays. But really the theater was and always will be my first love. And from there, directly from there, actually, I'm not sure if you know the narrator Jonathan Davis, who's quite famous for a lot of things, including Star Wars. But Jonathan and I did a production of Taming of the Shrew together in Georgia. And while we were doing that, Jonathan said that he thought I had the right voice for this thing he did called audiobooks, which I'd never heard of. I didn't know what they were. It was also 20 years ago. So this was a very different time in the industry where it was pretty niche and where not everybody knew quite what that was. They were also called books on tape at the time. So Jonathan graciously offered for me to submit an audition to his company, which no longer exists, unfortunately, but it was actually a not-for-profit company. It was called Talking Books. It was the National Library Service for the Blind. And I worked in the nonprofit sector, recording books for the blind for many years before I actually did a commercial book and before my career really opened up. But I went from books on tape to books on CD to downloadable content, going from studios to then the home studios. And I've been in the position to sort of ride the wave of all of the ways that the industry has changed. And then somewhere in there, I started wrote a book series, was published when I actually moved to Denver for a bit of time, started writing there and have continued ever since. And then Emily and I can talk a little bit more about how we got together to work up that. But that's the basics of how I am, and that I feel like I've gotten to evolve along with this industry, both in terms of my craft and in terms of the business itself, which has been a real privilege.
Emily?
Hey, okay.
Match that. Match that, Emily Wu Zeller.
I know, right? God damn it. This is one of the best things about our relationship, actually. It's like, okay, gauntlet thrown.
It's true.
Okay, well, so I started first as a dancer and singer and musician. And so my beginnings in theater were largely musical theater based, because I had the other two skills, and sort of, theater happens when you're doing the other two things every now and then. So I'd kind of like dabbled in it, but mostly was focusing on doing dance and singing. And then I, after college, moved to Hong Kong, and my mother's family is from there, and my sister was living there at the time. So I lived with her and said, I don't know, I'll figure it out. Got a job teaching dance, and eventually from there was able to find another job through the acting and performing community of immigrants there. And I like to call them immigrants, not expats. Mm-hmm. So I got a job, or got an audition, and then got the job dubbing anime. And so that was my first real voiceover gig. I had done a few things, for shows. They want somebody on the God mic, or they want a recording of something or whatever, right? So I wasn't unfamiliar with recording, but I hadn't specifically done voiceover. And this was 6 days a week, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Yeah, but a lot of the time was spent kind of in the break room. We got called into scenes as they came up. Oh. It's kind of crazy. We did 4 episodes a day. Yeah, it was really like churn them out. And it was kind of a golden age of dubbing. Mm-hmm. It's easy for me to say that because I was involved, but I actually feel like we did a good job. And with my colleagues that I spoke to who had been there before and who stayed after I left, they said, oh yeah, no, it really started to fall apart. For various reasons. It wasn't just because my dumbass was there. It was a lot of other things that were contributing to that. Anyway, so when I came back to the States, I was like, this thing that I never thought that I could actually do. I mean, as a kid, right, sang along with all the Disney songs and was like, I sound just like Ariel. I want to do her. I want to be her, right? So, but then it was like, oh my God, no, I really love this, and I'm like decent at it, so I want to keep doing it. And then found an audition for BBC Audiobooks America, which is what they were called at the time, in Rhode Island, which is where I landed when I came back to the States for a little bit. And that was the beginning. So that was 2009. That's when I started. And it wasn't quite books on tape. It wasn't quite Library of Congress. But it was, we got a physical manuscript in the mail. So it was paper, and it was going to CDs for sure. I think by then we were all doing punch and roll, though. There wasn't like actual tape that you recorded on or anything. But yeah, so
Em, do you remember all that paper? We did used to get scripts in the mail, and it was like that's how they, and you would literally, so if you can imagine, Viviana, it was like a 500-page manuscript that you received.
Yeah.
In the mail. Sometimes it was the book itself, but usually it was like a printed off version.
Right.
And it was the pre iPad days. Now we generally all use our iPads, but at the time it was. And I miss it, but also I'm thrilled we're not wasting paper like that. And it's also like terribly inconvenient to be like wandering around New York with like, what if you had 2 500-page scripts in your bag,
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yep.
Yeah. Some technology has really gotten us to a point where we're a little bit lighter. I will say that it's taken me a long time to look into doing that whole like highlighting and making those notes. Like it's not the same when you're doing it on like on the side margin, like when you're doing it. Not that I write on books, people. Okay, calm down.
No. I know. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah. No. But there's a lot of apps nowadays that kind of give you that illusion of still writing on paper. So I'm like, okay, this is okay. But yeah, again, I straddle both generations, so still there. But yeah, no, I remember the books on tape as a child, and then the CDs, and then when I started blogging, we would get the CDs, and we would have to change them. We're like 9 or 10 discs depending on the story, and I'm like, oh man, what track were we on? Now we just have to make sure we download before we get to the car.
Right.
Yeah. So you two powerhouses get together to create Love Bytes originals. Tell us how that came about and what exactly Love Bite Originals is.
Yeah, well, we both kind of came to it on our own. And then we had Tanya Eby, you probably have had her on your podcast.
Yeah, well, I know
before.
Tanya. Yeah.
Another
little narrator there. Yeah.
another powerhouse. Exactly.
Ooh,
she connected us because we had both independently talked to her about our ideas, and she was like, you two should probably talk to each other. And the way that I'll let Gabra talk about how she came to it, but the way I did was one of my best friends from college was it's kind of a rough story, actually. She took her own life pretty young. She was still in her 20s, and something that she was Taiwanese American, and something that she and I had. I went to UC Berkeley. Sorry, this story is. I should have the elevator pitch for this, but I don't. And it's because it's still pretty emotional for me.
That's right. It's a deep story. That's why.
It's a deep story. Yeah. Right. So I went to UC Berkeley, which is a very sex positive kind of place. And I fully embraced that and really loved that about my college experience. And my friend, her name was Betty, was also embraced that, even though she was less in the arts side of things and was more in the math and sciences side of things. Long story short, she talked about porn in both a celebratory way and also a really troubling way, right? And she and I had talked about how I was just getting into books, right, at the time. And I was like, romance, that's what's up. Like, that's where there's so much money in romance. And like, you don't have to watch a human being. You get to listen or read about a human being. And so there's something left to the imagination. There's a layer of remove. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, right? Like,
absolutely.
There's something more exciting for me about being able to read or listen to something rather than having to watch a video and then thinking about those humans who are involved in that. Like, how willingly are they there? Is that real? All that stuff. That doesn't have to happen when I'm listening to a story or reading a story. And it was actually at her funeral. I was like, Betty would have loved if we had stories that featured queerness and that featured non-white people and that were short instead of having to commit to like a 8-hour novel, because she wasn't an avid reader, right? She wasn't somebody who just naturally gravitated toward books. So yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then the audiobook career took off and I didn't have time, but it was always something that I wanted to do. I even like bought websites and was like, I'm going to do this someday. I'm going to do this someday. And I like happened to I was working through like an app idea, and I talked to Tanya about it one night at a dinner that we happened to be at. And then like a year later, I get this email from Gabra. So I'll let Gabra pick up.
That's a great lead in. And I don't know, Em, that story should ever be smoothly told. It's not a smoothly told, it's a beautiful story, but I don't think it should be like an elevator pitch. You know what I mean? Because I think every time I hear you talk about her, and it was would you mind just before I go, just saying where Love Bites Originals come, because it was actually named for her, really.
Yeah. Tell us.
Yeah. Well, so the site that I originally wanted and the app that at the time I wanted to develop for her was called Betty's Love Bites. So yeah, so we took the Love Bites part of it and turned it into Love Bites Originals.
But they're Betty's Love Bites as far as I'm concerned. I mean, like that's the origin of the name of this of this company. Yeah. I myself, to take this in a totally other direction, and, especially because this is at 100% a labor of love, which is why it might seem strange for me to reveal that I came up with the idea for our first series, Nice and Naughty, by saying, I know how I'm going to make my millions. So these two things don't usually connect. They have in this moment, but my idea was, I know how I'm going to, I actually think it came from there's this beautiful, let me remember the name. I can't remember it. New York used to, I'm not sure if they still do. They used to offer these free classes, not single classes, but term level classes for entrepreneurs. And it was, if you had an idea and you wanted to get it off the ground. And I got into this group and started planning out ideas. And I didn't have an idea. A lot of people came in and said, like, I want to do a brick and mortar store, or I want to do a website, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I just came in saying, I know that I want to create something and I'm not sure what. And I had a eureka moment in the middle of that training, of which I only half completed it because my father passed away and I wound up having to leave the training. But halfway through, I had this eureka moment. And Emily, I don't know if I've ever shown you this, but I had this eureka moment where I drew what I thought the website would look like, of this idea of these kind of choose your own adventure short stories, where you could have different teams of writers writing different stories, and that you could just choose and say, like, I want to follow this character, or I want to follow this character. It was my idea of where I thought audio would be going. And out of that came this idea for a romance specific version of that, Nice and Naughty, where you get to choose, do you want to just listen to the romance, or do you want to listen to the erotica? What are you in the mood for? Would it be possible to string a story that goes through all of them so that you could listen to them separately? You could listen to them at the same time. I started writing stuff, and I'm not sure where I was in the process when I reached out to Tanya Eby about it, right? Tanya being the connector here, to say, like, what do you think about this material? Where does this go? And she connected me with Emily, because she had spoken to her and, like, had a sense of what Emily was creating. But not only was I trying to create this kind of wonderful choose your own adventure like scape of Nice and Naughty stories, but in addition, I live in Queens. I love Queens. Queens is the most diverse urban area in the world. And I wanted to write the world as I see it, which is that when I walk down the streets of Queens, everyone's speaking a different language. Everyone is from a different background. It's the most delicious patchwork of backgrounds and languages and sexual preferences and. And I very much wanted to write that. And it was at a time in the world in which I was really saying, like, as a white writer and as a white, cisgendered, mostly straight identifying writer, am I allowed to write stories that encompass a larger world? And the answer was, I don't know if I'm allowed to, but it's the world I see and it's the world I want to write so badly. And so I had started sort of trying to make sure that in these Nice and Naughty stories, that it was a wide diversity of both backgrounds of characters, of sexual preferences, and I was like, sort of like trying to plant the seeds of this being a community that could then build out into, again, as the initial vision was, teams of writers taking like certain tracks and writing them, and make it a real, like, choose your own adventure, and make it a real community project. And that's when, like, I meet with Emily, who's all about, like, about community, short form romance and erotica, and also diversity of background, of sexual preference, of identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out that we were right in line with each other, and both, I think, have continued to amplify each other's desires to put this material out into the world, and to have it have a lot of, like, humor too, right? So it's like we talk about heart, heat, and humor all the time. It's like, it's got a lot of heart. It's also sexy. It's got a lot of, like, and we also both, like, Emily and I both love cooking. And it turns out that one of the lead characters of this is Nana. Everything's happening after Nana has passed away, but a lot of her spirit and energy is in these stories of her granddaughters and their, like, adopted brother, they're all huge parts of the stories, and there's baking is part of all the stories. And so we then asked a friend of mine who's a baker, one of my best friends, to write recipes for us in Nana's voice that became part of this as well. So then suddenly it became a romance, and erotica, and in the center, a recipe, oftentimes an erotic recipe, something to bake, So like this then became like this kind of like huge community effort of like putting out all this kind of energy into the world in a technicolor way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And our hope is that, our plan is to just keep diving into this world, right? So as the seasons go on, ideally, eventually each of the characters will carry their own season, right? So you can like somebody who like showed up just on a one-liner from season 1 or season 2 will eventually carry their own. You'll just get a glimpse into their life in another season. And because it's pulling from such a rich source, the possibilities are really endless. And we like that, where it can be both diverse and contained within this world at the same time. And it can just be an enormous, right? So yeah,
that's right. And we already have set up. So in beginning that, we feel like we already have a community in terms of our voice artists, in terms of our illustrator, the person who created original music for us, our friend who is helping us remarkably do a lot of the marketing and social media, and another friend who did the website, another friend writing the recipes, and then our friend Ronnie Butler, who voiced the character of Shorty, is now writing Shorty's track in season 3, which of course we've not yet put together and has not come out yet. We've now just done seasons 1 and 2. But again, we're beginning on this goal that we both had, to have this be a real community effort, that we have different writers we know and love, and even people we don't know who we've just met or whose work we're enamored of, to come in and write with us as well.
Yeah, which is, it's been extremely fulfilling, because in one of the original versions of what I had thought that this would be, it was, just kind of turning existing writers of erotic content into audio, right? Which in and of itself is for short stories, but to be able to collaborate at the writing level is really, really nice. But that said, like we are starting here and tending to grow. Like we've like Gabra just said, we're bringing in Ronnie, right? We're working for season 3. We are open. So if there are people who are interested in writing short stories and just having them produced, like they don't have to even exist within the Nice and Naughty world.
Nope.
Like we are interested in producing these types of stories. So if we were happy to receive submissions, if anybody was interested in just having somebody help them produce their short story audio. If it's in line with our mission, then we're totally down. So
that's right.
Yeah, that's great. I know that that was going to be one of my questions, is that usually we're used to having things be in a box set or a collection. And then you guys busted out with seasons and episodes. And
yeah.
That's right.
So how did that come about, as far as that, figuring out that format for these? Because I know they're short stories, but some of them range from like 45 minutes to like an hour and something. And then how do you guys decide that?
Well, I think that came from, Gabra, correct me if I'm wrong, but when she had written, my understanding was you had written, thinking you had submitted something to Audible, right? It was it might even have been this series. That
yes. You're right. It was the first 2. I think it was the first 2 episodes, actually. Yeah.
Because Audible does produce. They also produce some things, and so she had submitted to them, thinking that with the eye toward potentially it could be turned into a TV series, right? And so then that turns it into seasons and makes it into episodes.
Yeah, I think also, again, I do this all the time when I'm like, aha, this is my $1 million idea. And this, I think, is my $1 million idea. But I also thought to myself, I'm going to stop doing, you're going to love this, Emily. I don't know if I've voiced this to you yet, but I also thought I know the difference between writing stuff that I love and writing stuff that's just for money. And with this, I'm going to make this as conventional as possible. Like initially, like Nice and Naughty was meant to be written all around Christmas, and like Christmas themed. And it's like, I'm going to write it as conventionally American as possible. I'm going to make it like middle America. I'm going to make it small town. and I'm going to make it as conventional as possible. And whenever I utter words like that, immediately it turns out to be like the strangest, weirdest, most wonderful opposite of that as possible. I don't have the ability to do that. Whatever conventional is, it's never worked for me. And I've tried it so many times, even in my own life. Whenever I say that's it, and I did, I'm done with New York and I'm going to move to Denver and live a normal life. It's going to be normal and it's going to be conventional. It's going to look like everyone else's life. And it just became weirder from that moment. It's like I have like an anti-potion or something. So there was something about this project that it was like, it's going to be as conventional as possible. And just from the word go, it was like as unconventional as possible. Did I ever articulate that to you, Emily, that the goal was the goal was like convention and small town and
well,
America?
actually, yeah, because because I remember when we first looked at the copy and I was looking it over and I was like, this is so fucking funny and so sweet and fun. I'm like, but can we like add more clearness and can we add more color? And yes, we should start with it being kind of conventional and then do kind of a bait and switch. Like, sure, why not?
That's
right.
Like,
yeah. So
that's exactly right. That Emily really pushed this in the direction that I wanted to go with it anyway. But I laugh, like I remember telling a friend of mine, like, I've decided to write this small town series of romances. This was before we were working together. And it was Allison Johnson, another brilliant narrator. And Allison was like, oh, great. Well, where have you set it? And I was like, well, I've set it in Queens.
Yeah.
She's like, Gabra, that's not small town. And I said, it kind of is small town. If you think about New York City, like Queens is made up of all these little neighborhoods and it's my version of small town. And Allison was like, Gabra, that's not small town. I mean, it was a fabulous conversation. I can
imagine. And I can imagine Gabra being so passionate. Like, listen, it is a small town, it's a small community. And everybody else is like, no, we love you, right? But no.
It's also like Allison's one of those people who takes no shit from anyone and just like doesn't do like bullshit. And she was like, it doesn't matter what you say to me. It's not small town if you're talking about Queens.
Yep.
It would be an interesting pitch though, as far as how you would think of it, because, a lot of times when people, hear, oh, I live in New York or I live in like Miami or Orlando, no one stops to think that there are these subdivision cities, and some of them are like small towns.
That's
in a huge city metropolis kind of a thing. And we actually have a few of those here in Orlando. And it's amazing. Yeah. It's almost like Lorelai's little small town, the Gilmore Girls, where they have a middle, and everything. Yeah. And I'm like, but you're in Orlando. And I go, yeah, but small town.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And
I got you, girl. I got you.
That's right. And we actually have them. We have the actual hometown. So they're all living in Queens, but we have the hometown of this family as the North Fork out on Long Island, which actually is like a series of small towns and like an old farming community. So we did use a little bit of like local, but still like, it's not, I agree with Allison. Allison is always right and was indeed right. Like, it's not small town, but it is.
How we think of it. Yeah.
It is my version of small. I mean, for me, it's small town, or it's my version of small town. It's ridiculous.
As we always say, vision is everything.
Right.
Yeah. And I also love that it has, and I know you kind of answered a little bit as far as the baking. Usually sometimes people will do something like at a family restaurant and things like that. But there's just a lot of things that when it comes down to baking that can be sensual and sexy. And at the same time, oh, so innocent, depending on who's talking about it. Not in my case. And it's, and also the fact that you have like a grandma, because they're not human beings, they're just grandma, they have no past. But you've done something really cool about it. It's provided some information about grandma and grandma's past, Nana's. So,
that's right. And grandma's that Nana's the sexiest of all of them. I mean, like, a lot of the recipes are erotic. It turns out that Nana's past, more of which is divulged in season two. Was quite romantic and quite boundary pushing, so that's been I know that Emily and I both share a real passion for romantic stories for people of all ages as well, for age diversity as well. And so the idea that like someone who is an older, right, who is usually looked at as just grandma or that older lady, actually has this very sensual past, and is sensual up until she's an older woman as well. As an older woman, she's writing sensually when she passes these recipes off, that doesn't go away. That's not like something that's lost because she's whatever age she is,
Yeah. And so, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, so the romance industry, it's historically a woman-centered, what is this called? Not genre. Genre? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, romance is genre.
Yeah. And that's something to be celebrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. It doesn't mean that it's excluding men. Certainly not. I mean, we have Ronnie Butler, right, who's going to be penning the next season. But it's not something to be ashamed of, to shy away from, right? It's something to be embraced, and to fully embrace that means to acknowledge that if you do have children, it doesn't mean that you've fallen off the face of the earth and you lose all sexiness. If you didn't have children, if you didn't get married, that all of a sudden after you turned 30 or 40 or 50, that you've disappeared off of the face of the earth. Right? There's just a real worshiping that even women, we do to ourselves, where we believe that the height of our power and our sex is in our 20s or even teenagers, which is awful, but it's the truth, right? That's what America idolizes, and a beautiful thing, an important thing, actually, to embrace sex and our sexual lives and selves and our full selves beyond that. So that's like Gabra was saying, that's another aspect of diversity that we're really championing.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are now starting to ask for, like, can we have a heroine in her late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, or late 40s, 50s? Because we're still here.
right.
We don't stop existing at 25. And
in fact, there's sure, some things are sagging a little more than they were before, whatever, right? Like now we have a better sense of who we are and what we like and what we want. And we're we're less afraid to ask for it. Right. And that makes for very interesting dynamics when you're in between the sheets. So, yeah.
But also the we tend to have, as women, you're no longer the individual. Now you're the wife, the mother, the grandmother. And even when it comes down to introduction, it's not, like, hi, this is the CEO of blah, 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 and my wife, so-and-so. No, this is my wife, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, sorry. I cut that quickly. Because it's something that, as much as I am proud of, women being anything, the mom, the wife, the daughter, the granddaughter, the kid, or whatever, we're more than that title. And we were something before we got that title, and we're still something during it. And then even afterwards, the widower, or something like that, divorcee, single parent. Like, no, dude, I still like sex, and I'm still a woman, and I still want some, and I'm going to go get some. And this is how I'm going to do it.
That's right. It's also so interesting to me. If you look at a lot of times, if I'm not mistaken, if you look at who is writing romance often and who's engaging in a lot of our storytelling, if we're looking at the women who are doing it, they're older.
Yes.
They're majority 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, writing these brilliant stories that encompass women, oftentimes of all ages, but oftentimes it's younger women who because that's what the genre sort of has called for up until now. But regardless, if we think about who's writing them, we think about that imagination, and we think about then it's like, but if that's who's writing it, well, then obviously we know that those feelings and those desires and those ways of being haven't gone away. That's who's writing the stories. It's not like someone who's like, I have nothing left, I've disappeared. No, it's like, I'm writing this story, these fascinating, beautiful, remarkable, rich, romantic stories. That's who's writing them. So
I just think that because of society having the definition of what sexy and beautiful is kind of stops in that range of like 25. Unfortunately,
I know. Well, and especially here, I mean, I think that's like, it's not just here. It's the Western world for sure,
Yeah.
but it's more here. It's like more in America for whatever reason. Do we really look upon women as sort of being like dying on the vine from like 28 on,
and
you know?
Well, and some another aspect of this is that the way that older men are older men I'm talking about
You
are
mean the
talked about as
sexy
being
gray
sex.
fox?
right. So like how possible it is for us to just shift our perspective and to see something physical, gray hair, silver hair as beautiful instead of something that's to be shunned. I mean, like we just, as humans and culture and different cultures over time, we do it anyway. Right. Having pubic hair, not having pubic hair. It's anyone's, it's like, just because a group of people decided, you know what, this is what's going to be cool right now. It's like, so first of all that, and then secondarily, often the thing that is sexy about older men is power.
Yes.
And so when you look at older women and you can see the power that they have, when you bring to light the power that they already have, we don't have to give them more power. They already have it, right? So it's just about shining a light on it
and acknowledging it.
Acknowledging it, right? That you can, that also can be sexy.
Yeah. And that the scars that we wear, whether it's the C-section or the stretch marks or anything like that, are scars of strength and beauty. And you know, it's gonna happen, like it or not. you know, just like I mean, I had a friend at 16, a guy friend that at 16 was already going gray. So I mean, it happens to everybody. I mean, things just happen. I will say that there's been some talk over like on TikTok, and there's this one woman who is older, but damn, she's fun and sexy. And I'm like, I wish I looked like that now. And I'm like, you strut it, girl. I wish I could wear that, you know, or even some of the girls that are a little, you know, they're not your typical size 10, but they're curvy and they're vivacious and they're confident and they don't give a flying fuck if it's a crop tot or not. It's just that empowerment. I'm like, can you bottle some of that confidence up for me, please? You know, start selling it. But I think it comes from other women really supporting it and being part of that group and community that of support and acceptance and things like that. That's the other thing to what I love about Love Bytes. It's that, you know, promoting and celebrating sex positivity.
Yes. Yeah.
Regardless of what that looks like for the individual.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the romance genre is very looked at as quote unquote mommy porn.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and then also there's those blur lines of respect and things like that. And you know, erotica tends to get a really bad rap on, you know, it's like, that's not real literature, you know, same thing with romance, but erotica specifically, it's like, that's just like sex with words. And I'm like, yes, but it can still be nicely done. Thank you very much.
That's right. That's right. And that the criticism of it being sex with words is like, okay, well, and I have a career, a good standing in sci-fi and fantasy. And I love it. I really love it as a genre, or broad genre. But that's just, okay, so it's fighting with words. Okay, so it's space exploration with words. Okay, so it's political intrigue with words. Sex with words is just like anything else. It doesn't make it any less legitimate because it happens to deal with something that Christian ideology decided was a bad thing a long time ago, right? Like, so
and tabooness and stuff like that. But again, it's just, you know, there's different type of, you know, the sex work industry, you know, and, you know, it's, you know, how we do things, and the fan only clubs are not, you know, the websites are having issues with that now. And I'm like, dude, you narrators are providing something to the listeners as well. And then I've had some people say, but isn't that like sex? Like, and I go, yes, some of them are in the erotica genre and they're narrating these books, but they're not doing everything. It's still left to the imagination, which is fabulous. And it's just, you know, it's about respecting the person behind the mic, just respecting the author that's writing the story, you know, and providing us these things. So it's a lot. So I love that you guys have that as part of the blurb in the books. It's like one of those, just in case y'all forgot. I'll remind you again that it is about that. But it's also, I mean, again, the short bites, it's also what I love too, because sometimes those 8-hour books, I love them. I really do. Kristen Ashley is one of my favorites. That woman writes 24 hours, story time and everything. And it's great. But sometimes I just want something short and sweet and like a quickie. I just literally want a quickie.
Right, exactly. You want the thumbnail. You don't want to have to like do the whole hour movie.
We got to put that. We got to put that on our site more, Emily. We got to. I'm going to quote you, Viviana, if you don't mind.
No, by all means.
Sometimes I just want something that's like a quickie. I feel like we got to put that on our website.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, it's the truth. You know, it's that moment of, you know, instant gratification. And sometimes you're having a bad day, you know, or a bad week or couple of months or whatever. And you just want to feel good. And the humor that you guys have in these stories and the camaraderie that's happening. And you're like, yeah, that's possible. And then again, the romance and then the steaminess is like, yes, goals. So
yes.
Yeah. So I know, Gabra, you've done some of the writing. You said that Ron Butler is doing some of the stuff in season 3. How do you guys go about selecting the authors? And Emily, are you also writing?
I am not writing. No.
She's like, no.
No, but Emily has very much been I don't know that the editor is not a full enough term. Like, we have co-created this world, and Emily is the reason why we have. And so I have written thus far. I have written the majority of the work to sort of set up the world, and Emily has guided all of that. Meaning, she reads it, she's editing it, she's suggesting ideas. We're bouncing things off each other. So this is a co-created world. This is a collaborated, co-created world in which I, up to this point, have done most of the writing. Now, again, my friend Rachel Fowler has written all of the recipes thus far. I think separately, we're going to put together a book of just Nana's recipes because they're all so good.
That. Yeah.
That'd
be awesome.
We have to get Rachel to like do all of them and take pictures and do it like a really proper.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Pictures in culinary books must have, you have to have pictures. Otherwise I'm not buying it.
But we have to have like a group of people like dressed in like aprons with nothing else underneath them presenting the dishes.
Yeah. I mean, okay, now this might be crazy, but so this isn't a little window into how Gabra and I work. It's just like, what if we did this? Because when you just said that, I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we had from our Patreon followers or our listeners, people from the newsletter, and are like, if you want to make this at home, and if you are able to take a really nice picture of what you did and you want to submit that, maybe we'll just draw from the community, right? And it's like, cool, you made this thing, and we can.
No, it's a fantastic idea. We should absolutely do that. Although I was just envisioning, I was like, I know that Ronnie Butler would put on like a long apron with nothing else underneath it and cook something amazing.
Absolutely. And just as a key side angle, you know, just showing us that there's nothing with whatever the dish is right at a hip level. So there's really nothing, but again, imagination.
Yeah, no, that's happening. So thus far, it's been me writing the majority, Rachel doing all of the recipes, and Emily doing all of the co-creating and editing. And then moving forward, we've got Ronnie working on the next season, and then Emily and I have to plan like our next couple of seasons. Who's writing what?
Nice.
Yeah, but we really want to draw from the again, anybody who wanted to submit. And authors that we know,
that's right,
whose work we've enjoyed before.
That's right.
So,
because you also guys have a Patreon going. Tell us about that and how that came about. Because I know it's kind of getting popular now. People doing Patreon originally came up with this whole concept of for creators, and usually people think like arts and artists as far as painters and sculptures and things like that. And now the writing community is kind of moving into that space for different reasons. I think it would be kind of cool if you guys got your top tier to kind of give you some story ideas.
And
have it be like co-written by them.
We did. There's a great idea. We did have someone who reached out. Em, can we discuss what her idea was that was like written into, that we had an idea right before I did the final edits on season 2 that was put into season 2?
Yeah, and I think the reason that she suggested it was because it is in one of our tiers where we are open to, like, you can offer suggestions for like things that you want to see, and we can either highlight them or Easter egg them. In this case, I think it was kind of an in between. It's a definite character. It's neither an Easter egg nor a main character, but definitely somebody prominent.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the suggestion was, if I'm not mistaken, the suggestion from someone who's just a wonderful listener and a wonderful fan, pardon me, the suggestion was that she felt that there was not a whole lot of, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Em, that she felt that there was not a whole lot of trans female with cisgendered female lesbian romance. And
Correct.
she was wondering if we could perhaps write that. That was her idea. And as it happened, I had already written something, and I was, again, just going through editing. I had already written, and this is a character that everyone loves. It's the character of Sam, voiced by Amy Landon, brilliant voice artist and friend. That she's actually undercover. She's an undercover agent, and she's like on the hunt for this woman who was her handler, who's been kidnapped. And I had written a scene that happens between her and an agent she meets, who at the time was a cisgendered lesbian as well. And when I got the suggestion, I switched that character to being a trans woman as opposed to a lesbian character. And then they still have the same scene together. So it will be fleshed out. Again, hopefully that would be like a character line that would be fleshed out by a trans female writer. To do like a whole track there, but I wanted to lay the groundwork for that so that story could begin, because I loved the suggestion and because it lent itself to something that was already in play.
That's awesome. Again, all about inclusivity and being able to see yourself in these romance stories is always great. You know,
that's right.
Like, I like it when I'm like, oh, look, she's a size 14 plus. Yay.
I know. Exactly. Right.
You know, or, oh my goodness, she's Latina, but she doesn't have an accent. Yay.
Exactly.
It's a pet peeve of mine when they do some of the, the things like a Latina, then all of a sudden has like that Mexican accent. And I'm like, first of all, not all of us are Mexican. Thank you. And second of us, yes, I know I have some form of an accent. You can't figure out what it is, but you're not going to automatically go, es Latina, and it's just those things where I love it when you have that, you can kind of see yourself a little bit in these characters.
That's right.
So that's always cool.
That's
so
right.
Thank you for that too.
Yeah, no, that's what I always love that too. Again, like that's the Queens thing that like I love when I'm walking through Queens and like I'm hearing different accents. I'm seeing different people. Some people have accents. Some people don't. Some people are speaking different languages. Some people don't. It's such a wonderful, delicious, like it's the way I always thought the world should be and was. But I'd never lived in a place where I felt really that way authentically, and we did want people also to, part of our goal is to have content that's written in other languages for people who just speak those languages, as well as people writing in other languages for an English ear to just hear the other languages and not quite know what's going on, but know enough to understand what's going on, like a romance between two people where one person's speaking English and one person speaking Spanish, for example, and to just like have like an English ear listening to that and be like, I get what's going on. You know what I mean? I think you're going to get what's going on. And it's just going to be cool to hear to hear it. It's the way I think a lot of us, if we're living in areas that have that kind of diversity, it's the way we walk through the world. We hear sometimes we hear half conversations, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to.
Well, and I think it's actually that is the heart of what the American dream is, right? That's theoretically what the country was supposed to be founded on. Is this idea of true freedom and true global environment, right? Where it doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is, who are you as a human being, and can you come to a place and live a better life because you're not constrained by whatever, so
Yeah. So thank you so much for giving us that glimpse into what we could actually strive to be better at, as human beings, as a community, as a world, and also to know that it's possible, that we can get there and be there. And some of us are close to it, or have a good community around us that are acceptance. Yeah. And if not, we're over here, come over.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Emily and Gabra, before we go, can you tell us what's currently going on next for, the Love Bytes originals?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well,
go ahead, Em. You take it, and then I'll take it.
Okay, great. Yep. So as we've mentioned before, we're working on season 3 and probably going to start the very, very baby beginnings of the season after that, season 4.
Right.
And I'll let Gabra talk about the
and
we're working on.
And I've got a new season coming up. Is that what you're talking about, or is there
a new series?
I've got a whole new series that I'm just about to send Emily the full. She's read about half of it. I'm about to send her the first draft of it. But unsurprisingly, it is similarly written. It's written episodically. It takes place in Queens. It's very diverse. It's
small town, right?
That's a small town. It's filled with heart and heat and humor. And I was trying to figure out, I did a bunch of research on like where all these girls, there's like this girl gang from Queens and like what school did they go to? And so I was researching, because they're all a little older, also they're all in their 40s. And so I was researching like, okay, so like 30 years ago, where would they all have gone to? Which PS would it be? So like they talk about like being from like PS 122, but I do a bunch of local Queens research to figure out what school they would have gone to. Anyway, but that's what's coming up next. We've got more series coming up, more seasons of Nice and Naughty, and another series, and hopefully lots more work with other writers doing different stuff as well.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you again for creating this space where, again, such a diverse and creative group can exist and we can hang out and get to know each other. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for having us on your podcast. This is so lovely.
It is our pleasure. It was such a wonderful, wonderful time to get to talk to you about this. And thank you for being, again, so welcoming and so warm and having us on.
You're awesome.
Thank you. We are going to be including all the links to both the ladies individually, as well as the Love Bytes community and their website, so you guys can follow them if you guys are not already, because you should. And and until next time, happy listening.
Thank you to all of our Audiobook Lovin Podcast Patreon. Special thanks to Nixley Zenner, Carol Liebner, Line Black Peterson, Brittany Robinette Leiter, Don Darch, Michelle Bastard, Nancy Billows. The Audiobook Lovin Podcast has special Patreon access levels. Join today to receive benefits including early access to episodes, shout-outs, special exclusive content, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobookloving. We thank you for your support.
Thank you for joining us on the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. For links and more information discussed in today's episode, previous podcasts, or the Audiobook Lovin Series, please visit our website, vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast. Until next time, happy listening.